This is Glenn Loury the first of bloggingheads.com and .tv, bloggingheads.tv, The Glenn Show. Sorry. And Glenn, my son, introduce yourself.
Glenn 2, Electric Boogaloo, 11 Copley Street.
Welcome back, son.
I'm glad to be back.
Our second conversation, or shall I say a continuation of our first conversation, which received very good positive reviews from the viewership of bloggingheads.tv. People wanted to hear more from you, and I thought it might be fun for us to continue the conversation. So we're back talking and stuff.
Well, it's really a continuation of many conversations, I guess. But here we are.
Here we are.
Talking about stuff.
Talking about stuff. Our agenda today is politics and religion.
It's kind of a retread.
Retread of what we did last time, although maybe we'll have something new to offer on it. Certainly we have something new on the political front because of the election.
Yeah, we definitely have something. Yeah, we have something new to talk about. You have some humble pie to eat, some crow to eat, I believe.
I have to eat
this election.
I have to be humble? Why? Why do you say that?
Well, I'm just saying that for somebody who spent months talking about how Barack Obama was going to get crushed and who was reveling in that fact, I think is a fair word to use. Perhaps, I don't know, should, in the light of recent grand electoral victories, have some humble pie.
Okay, now...
It's just my thought.
Hold on a minute.
Or might have something to say about
Republican pundits like Dick Morris and Karl Rove are the ones who were running around raving about how Mitt Romney was going to get 300-plus electoral votes and Obama was going to get crushed.
Yeah, they did that openly. You were smart enough to only say that to me.
Oh, wait. I never said... Come on, Glenn. You have to tell the truth. I never said...
The truth?
Yeah, I never...
The truth is that you said on many occasions that you thought that Barack Obama was cruising for a bruising and that you weren't impressed and that Mitt Romney was this great stand-up guy running a flawless campaign.
I didn't say that.
I never was going to crusade on a white horse and
okay.
white electorate to the president.
May I speak momentarily to offer to the audience a more accurate characterization of my views?
Or your perspective.
You can correct the record if you think it needs correcting. I thought Obama could lose the election, and at a certain point I anticipated that he was going to lose the election. That's true. Okay, so duly acknowledged. And I thought at times that he, viewed in isolation, deserved to lose the election in the sense that I was not impressed with his campaign. On the other hand, I did vote for him. And I'm not...
Wait, you voted?
All right.
You can lie to your viewers all you want.
Evidently, I can't lie to my viewers. I would have voted for him if I had been able to get to the polling place before he closed, but I work in Providence, Rhode Island. I was down here overnight on Monday night, and I wasn't able to get back to Boston in time to cast my ballot. So I didn't actually vote for him. But I don't regard myself as having lied in the sense that I would have voted for him. But in any case, never mind. All right. I supported him. I just wasn't all that enthusiastic. It was a question of comparison to the alternative. But I did think that he was in trouble. I thought that he was in trouble after the first debate, as many people thought that he was in trouble. And I worried that the vaunted ground operation of the Obama folk might not be up to the 2008 level, and that there was a building kind of support for Romney in certain quarters that, maybe I was paying too much attention to what they were reporting on Fox News and so on. In any case, I acknowledged days before the election that it looked like Obama was going to win. You will recall that conversation because
that is true. You did flip-flop at the last.
Well, no. I admitted that I had been wrong previously and changed my assessment based on the objective evidence at hand. I don't regard that as flip-flopping. I regard that as being rational.
Well, okay, fine. You started paying attention to the objective evidence.
Okay. Perhaps that's also the case as the election drew nearer. But so what? So what if I wasn't sufficiently enthusiastic about the Obama candidacy that I was running around jumping up and down I didn't do that. Run around jumping up and down about Obama. So what? I mean, I don't understand why I need to eat humble crow because because I didn't drink Kool-Aid.
Well, it's not about the drinking of the Kool-Aid. It's about how you, and I'm not going to call you a Republican, others might, but many Republicans just willfully ignored the facts, and how this election is either going to face them to, actually face the music and consider major changes within their party, or is it going to continue to be their head stuck in the sand? And, I think you've heard some encouraging things from some people, like John Boehner, who's demanding that, if a deal comes in, that the House people are going to have to get into line no matter what the deal is. Although, he's not conceding on increasing the tax rate. But I think in other facets of the Republican Party, in particular people in the media, I think what you see is very troubling right now. The immediate reaction on Fox News after Barack Obama got elected was to blame the voters.
Excuse me just a moment, son. You're watching Fox News now, are you?
I was watching Fox News on the election night. I wanted to see how they would deal with the meltdown, and I saw Karl Rove go crazy.
Yeah, so did I.
I don't know if you saw that. I don't know how else to qualify that. Like his own network called Ohio for the president.
I know.
And he and many people like him just refused to stare facts in the face. And now, even with those facts that are coming to light, they refuse to actually look in the mirror and say, well, maybe it's me.
Well, I think that's a very widespread psychological tendency. Both the selective perception of the objective world to conform with one's pre-existing views and commitments. We see the things that we think we want to see or that we anticipate to see. We don't see the contradictory evidence as easily. And also this kind of avoidance thing, this denial. Denial is not just a river in Egypt, as they say, We are all susceptible to this avoidance of painful fact because painful fact has implications for how it is that we need to change our behavior. And I expect that the Republicans are going to be going through that big time in the months ahead. But it was an extremely divisive vote. If you look at the breakdown by demography, Obama wins the income classes under $50,000 a year, but loses all of them above $50,000. He wins the Hispanic and the black, but he loses by a substantial margin the white vote. And so on. It was an election where lines were very sharply drawn, and the country is divided. Does that trouble you?
Well, I mean, doesn't surprise me. I've always been troubled, though, by the direction that some people in this country are taking. I mean, I think we're very divided, and I think it's very troubling. It wasn't news. The election didn't tell me something I didn't already know.
Okay. Now, some of these people on Fox, in reaction to this, Bill O'Reilly is one I think of, Sean Hannity I expect, though I don't want to misquote him, are saying things like, the takers are the ones who won the election. The people, Mitt Romney's 47%, that, in effect, Romney was right to say that people with a handout to gain from government are the ones who are going to vote. So you can cobble together a majority, 51, 52% of the electorate any day of the week if you promise people stuff at the expense of the other 48% of the electorate. And that's what happened this time. How do you react to that?
Well, I think it's very childish. I think you can say that about Mitt Romney, too. He was also making promises to the people who were going to vote for him, i.e., namely higher income folks. But I think when you look at the facts, that's also just inaccurate.
Wait a minute, what's inaccurate?
Inaccurate. Their assessment of the facts is just inaccurate. I mean, the people who are voting for Barack Obama in Ohio and in Florida, many of them are working class people who aren't looking for a handout, but were just appreciating a president who actually seemed to care enough about their industries to want to keep them from collapsing. I think there's a difference there. I think there's a distinction there between looking for a handout, being a taker, and I don't know, asking for help when the circumstances are against you.
Well, I agree that...
And, it was also their language, you didn't mention this, was also very racially coded because the takers weren't anybody in the white establishment. I believe Bill O'Reilly used that phrase just outright on Fox News. He said, the white establishment voted for Mitt Romney, but it's not our America anymore. The America we know is dead. That's the narrative that they're spinning up there.
Well, hold on. Let's keep the race question separate from the class question for a moment. I'd like very much to discuss the racism and, if any, implicit in the conservative reaction to Obama's victory. But in talking about the 47% or the so-called takers, I agree that it is inaccurate to refer to everyone who might be making under $50,000 a year or who might be receiving some transfer payment from the government or some benefit from some program to refer to such persons as takers. Both because, as you say, many of them are simply working people who identify their interests as being more closely aligned with that of the Democratic Party, but also because many of these people receiving benefits are also people who have paid taxes and are entitled to these benefits, be they Social Security or Medicare or whatever, over the course of a lifetime. And also the fact that as a hurricane...
Many of them voted for Romney. I don't know if that's what you were going to say.
No. Well, we're starting out with the premise that they disproportionately voted for Obama, and now we're trying to decide whether that's a good or a bad thing. And I was just acknowledging that if they did so because Obama supported Social Security or bailed out the automobile industry more enthusiastically than Mitt Romney, doesn't mean that they're takers and shouldn't be so characterized. I wanted to concede that point. But then I wanted to go on and observe that there is objective evidence that the breakdown of the vote followed a certain kind of class and racial ethnic line that that wants to be observed. So it's in fact objectively the case that everyone, that the income classes above $50,000 a year of earnings were won by Romney in the balloting. The ones under $50,000 were won by Obama, and in some cases by a substantial margin. It's also the case that Romney won 60% roughly of the white vote, and that Obama won upwards of 95% of the black vote, or upwards of, what did he win, 70% of the Hispanic vote?
Yeah, but I think every Democratic candidate wins upwards of 90% of the vote.
Okay, but not everyone gets upwards of 70% of the Hispanic vote. But that's neither here nor there. We're not talking about Obama. We're talking about the electorate. And I'm not saying they voted for him only because he was black or that there was racism on behalf of the people who voted. I'm saying there was divisiveness, a sharp breakdown in the voting patterns by race in the country, and that's worth calling attention to. That's all.
Okay, I don't disagree with that.
Okay. Do you think it bodes ill or well for the future of the political process in the country? Is it a bad thing or a good thing, or not a matter of indifference to you, that there is this demographic, economic class, racial, ethnic, sharp difference in voting patterns in the country?
Well, I don't know. I think it's difficult to derive anything from that, considering how quickly things change in this country. Just 4 years ago, Barack Obama was winning the white vote in the election. It's difficult to say how things are going to carry over from one period to the next. If under Barack Obama he does happen to become more partisan, they do come to a deal that avoids the fiscal cliff, things continue to improve and improve faster economically, then I imagine that you'll be looking at a very different situation 4 years from now. I just think that the two candidates who were running in the last presidential election both ran one of the most negative, divisive campaigns, and I feel like we say this every 4 years. Maybe it's only getting more and more true in our memory. Because both of them, frankly, didn't have much to run on. Mitt Romney was trying to convince conservatives that he's a real conservative when nobody really knows what he believes. Barack Obama was trying to convince people that he had a competent presidency when the only thing he really accomplished was something that still nobody really likes.
You don't think that the Obama campaign was more negative orientated than the Romney campaign?
No, I don't think there's any evidence for that.
Yeah, my impression, I have not tried to systematically assemble evidence, is that the Obama campaign was more negative, and that the strategy of the Obama campaign from the very beginning was to demonize Mitt Romney. And I don't believe that that was the strategy of the Romney campaign, although some of the supporters of Romney certainly were into demonizing the president. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying, I'm not saying no negative ads were run against Obama. I'm saying a negative campaign
started demonizing Mitt Romney. It was the Republicans who did it first.
I'm sorry, but you're changing the subject now. I'm sorry, but you're changing the subject. I'm attacking the subject from a different angle. I'm not changing it. You're saying that Mitt Romney was painted a certain way. And I'm saying by the Obama campaign.
All Barack Obama's doing. I'm saying, yes, he did run a very pointed negative campaign. I'm not denying
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
I'm just saying that Mitt Romney also ran a very negative campaign.
So one statement is there was negativity in the characterization of Romney by the Obama campaign, which I'm maintaining. More so than the Romney campaign's negative characterization of Obama. That's what I'm maintaining. Another claim.
I'm challenging that.
A minute. Okay, you're challenging that. And another claim is that all the negativity directed at Romney didn't come from Obama. Some of it came from his fellow Republicans when they were competing for the nomination. Of course, that's true. I don't deny that at all. But I don't. Okay, so you're disputing that my claim, which is that the strategy from the very start of the president's campaign was to make Romney unacceptable, that the Bain Capital ads, that to talk about tax returns, that the stuff about a rich guy who doesn't have a clue about other people wasn't from the very start built into the cake a mainstay of the Obama campaign, largely because, as you observe, they didn't have much positive to be able to point to in the record to run on. They had to demonize the opponent. And I say that that was not the same going in the other direction. So,
well, I'm saying that Mitt Romney made it a lot easier for Barack Obama to run that kind of campaign than Barack Obama did for Mitt Romney to, at least run so pointed of an attack. I'd say that they attacked each other just as much, but Barack Obama was more successful because they had more ammo. Mitt Romney just kept on giving them things.
May I observe that you're changing the argument yet again? Now you're agreeing with me, perhaps, that Obama was negative, but you're saying that he did so because Romney made an easy target.
I know. You're asking me questions, and I'm giving you reasons for why I think that things are so. I'm not changing the subject. I'm not changing the argument. I'm saying that I challenge the assertion that Mitt Romney was less negative than Barack Obama. Neither of us has evidence. We didn't count up the amount of ads that they ran to back up this
Just
fact.
An impression.
And so then I'm saying why it might seem that Barack Obama's ads were more pointed and therefore to you more prominently negative because he had more of a cohesive strategy to go for because Mitt Romney kept on saying things that lost him the goddamn election.
I see. Well, he did do that. There's not any doubt about that. He might have also fought back more effectively against some of those attacks. He might have not said to an open recording microphone that he wasn't aware of statements about the 47%. I suppose he might have had a little bit less money offshore or might have had a different line of work. Maybe if he had been a community organizer. No, I'm being facetious now. Let me stop.
Yeah,
Let me stop.
Incredibly.
Yeah. This is now ancient history and not particularly relevant. But I think the kind of life that Mitt Romney appears to have lived in terms of his accomplishments in the spheres of politics and public life as well as in the business sphere, and whatever it is that we know about his private life in terms of his family, his generosity, his involvement in his church, and so on, all of these were very positive and creditable things and did not bespeak a character unfit to occupy the high office. But he certainly was portrayed as somebody who couldn't be trusted. Who do you trust? We can't trust this guy. And he didn't counter it effectively, and he lost the election for that and for other reasons, I suppose. But, okay.
Well, it's like I said to you many months ago. I compared Mitt Romney to John Kerry, and I think my comparison has borne out, I think, in the end. Because a large portion of why Barack Obama won the election, and I don't know if this question was put in any polls, is because he just seemed like somebody people would rather have a beer with. Because, and this has been my position consistently throughout, neither of these guys really had any footing to stand on as successful. I mean, you could point to Mitt Romney as running Bain Capital, but I don't think being a successful businessman really lends anything to being a good president.
Oh, come on. How can that not? Anyway, okay.
What? How can that? I mean, how can that? How can that prepare somebody for the office of the presidency? They're two entirely different things. Running a company, making profits for a company, is very different from improving the economy of a country.
No, I understand that.
They're very different things.
Jesus, Glenn. I understand that they're different jobs. What I'm saying is that the ability to manage a large organization, to organize a staff, to run a government, okay, those are not unrelated things. I mean, and the capacity to lead a group of people, to be able to articulate a vision and to motivate people behind it, these are not unrelated, whether they be in the private or the public sector. I can't see how it's not a positive thing that a person will have distinguished themselves in the private sector by being able to, organize a company, manage it, lead it, think through the strategic issues and all of that, and to be successful. I mean, I agree that they're not the same tasks. Okay,
I'm not saying.
Hold on, just a minute, please.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't finished. I was just going to say, there's no other job that's like the presidency of the United States. It could be said of any career that a person had before coming to that job that career doesn't prepare the person to do this. I'm only saying that the qualities of the individual that will be exhibited by success in business are relevant and creditable relative to assessing their. Okay, so.
Well, actually, I think there is a job, and that may even be in Mitt Romney's favor. It's called being governor.
Yeah, there is a job. It's not like president, but it's a little similar. You got to deal with a legislature, you got et cetera. It is a little similar, especially of a big state. It would be similar. Anyway, okay, so we are not going to agree about the relative merits, and it's, as I say, kind of ancient history. But let's talk about the racism thing. You're quite exercised about it.
Well, I mean, you were talking about how divided the election was.
Yeah.
And this was a lot of the coded language behind why it has to do with the race. I mean, you look, and I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself now, but you look in the aftermath of the election and how people are reacting to it, and you look at statements from people like Ann Coulter and people high up in the Tea Party saying that America is dead. And they're talking about white America. They're talking about this America that perhaps never really existed, or maybe it did. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't alive for it, where everything was going their way, and they could, to speak hyperbolically, call a black person boy without getting shamed for it or something. This is what disturbs me most. About the election and about the direction that people are taking in the face of Barack Obama's victory. I mean, you have just recently I read this news story actually right before we went on thing that Texas has sent in enough signatures petitioning for secession that the White House actually has to respond to it now.
Yeah, I saw that.
And this wasn't happening when Bill Clinton got elected or George Bush got elected to the presidency, and a lot of people were very dismayed about that in northern states. They weren't sending him letters asking to secede, at least not in this volume. And I think it's clear that to a certain extent, considering where this is coming from, that a lot of this has to do with the color of the president's skin and not the content of his character.
Well, may I just offer a couple of thoughts here, please?
Well, that is why we're here.
Okay. Appreciate you giving me an opportunity. It is the Glenn Show, but it's not clear which of the Glens is in charge around here. Which is par for the course, I'm afraid, in the Loury household.
Well, you get plenty of time. I've only been here twice.
All right.
I'm going to talk my piece.
Yes, you are, and no one can stop you, and that's a good thing. I was just saying that one possibility is that the people who want their country back and who are thinking of leaving and going to where? I don't know where they're going. Canada? Good luck. If you didn't like the socialist Obama, you're not going to like the socialists up north of the border. But in any case, that they are doing that because the president is black. And another possibility is that they're doing it because whereas they had previously been presumptively in a majority, they are now presumptively in a minority. That is, whereas the electorate had been at one point 70% white, or maybe even 75%, don't have the numbers right in front of me, that percentage has continually declined. Maybe it was 80% white, and now it's down to 70%. Those numbers are whatever they are, but they show it.
Well, it was once 100% white.
There you are. But I mean, in recent memory, and so now the increasing influence of the non-white electorate is giving that part of the population more leverage than heretofore over the discussion of important issues like immigration. The difference by age and by sex, women and men, single women versus married women, people under 30, people over 30, and so on, going to college campuses and appealing to votes, going out west and appealing for Hispanic votes when immigration is an important issue, may make some of the people who are not in those minority groups or in those age groups or in that gender age marital status cohort feel uncomfortable because others who don't have the same values as they are exerting more influence over the outcome of elections. Now, this latter concern, but let me be concrete, and I'm not going any very much longer. I'll be concrete in saying, suppose I'm concerned about protecting the border, and I think that illegal immigration is a real problem. And suppose I feel that people who come to the country illegally oughtn't be permitted to stay. Now, that's not a racist view in and of itself. It may accompany other racist views, but that in and of itself is not a racist view. It may be a view that you and I would reject, but it's not a racist view. And I see that the election is being decided in key swing states by a constituency that has identifiable attitudes different from my own about these questions, to whom the politicians are now openly appealing. What's wrong with me resenting that? I will resent that. I will feel that, again, my country, that is the country where my views had been normative heretofore, is not any longer as much mine as it had been. And I might respond to an appeal from some rabble-rousing politicians who say, come on, let's get together and take our country back. That's racism? I ask you.
Well, it's a little naive. Because the aforestated creed of America has always been that it's a melting pot. It's never been anyone's country. And so,
nice point,
for someone to hold the view that it's their country, I don't know. I don't credit that at all. Because I don't see it as, I think it's my country, but I also think that it's a country that a whole host of other kinds of people should be able to thrive in as well. And I think it's people sharing that attitude who, again, this is sort of tangential to what you were talking about, who helped crest Obama to victory. And I think such a backwards-looking view is not going to be a productive or popular one going forward.
Well, I think that's clear. I think there was wisdom in a couple of dimensions of what you just said. One is, it really never has rightly been understood to be anybody's country, although it has, in effect, de facto, been a white man's country for much of our history. It's never rightly been understood to be anyone's country. And so the claim, I want my country back, is rooted in a very wrong-headed understanding about what our relations ought to be in our civic life to one another. It doesn't belong to you, so you can't have it back. But the other thing, I think, is this denial problem, this fact that, demography is what it is. Birth rates are what they are. Immigration rates look like what they look like. And the fact of the matter is, it's never again going to be a, dominantly majority white country. That's just not in the cards to happen. And so attitude that's premised on the lament of something that is simply an inexorable working out of historical dynamics is wasting a whole lot of energy, because you can't turn back the clock on that sort of thing. So I think that's a correct thing to say. Do you think the Republicans are going to be able to recover in these months and years ahead?
I don't know. I see potential there. You look at people like Chris Christie, who famously embraced the president just days before the election, who understandably a lot of Republicans are angry at him for that. I mean, you look at people like Bobby Jindal, who perhaps is not a moderate in fact, but after the election has made this pivot, has made this adjustment. He said, I can't remember where he said this, but he said, we can't allow rich people to just keep on holding on to their toys, and he coded this what would have just months ago been called socialist language of they need to pay perhaps a little more than their fair share to help out the rest of us. And I think the future of the Republican Party could very well lie in people like those if they are given a shot. I mean, but that's not necessarily going to be the case. I mean, I could very easily see them continuing to deny the reality that's right in front of them and then imploding. And then, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that would happen soon. I don't know if that would happen. I mean, maybe if in 2016, they nominate somebody like, oh, God, I'm trying to think of somebody like, but let's say they nominate Paul Ryan. Very unlikely. And he gets crushed by Hillary Clinton. You might see the disintegration of a political party and the realignment and the creation of something new out of it. A new party.
Yeah. That's
I mean, I think that's pretty far-fetched, but I think they're going to adapt. I think the Republican Party is going to, if not become more moderate on some things, at least it will learn to couch its language more effectively, or focus more on the economic differences. Because I do think there is a legitimate discussion to be had about what is the best way to encourage growth and stability in this country, that they could talk about. But otherwise, I'm not really sure where they go from here.
Well, I think some stuff is easier than other stuff. So take immigration. I think it is easier to envision a Republican stance on immigration, which says secure the border, which ultimately gets around to saying secure the border, but at the same time recognize that the people who are already here, who have been here for some time, are not going to be deported en masse, and neither are they going to self-deport themselves en masse, and that they can't be made to live under a shadow or forced into a status of second-class residency and so on. They need to be given some kind of regularized mechanism for legal residence in the country over some period of time under some circumstance. I think it's easier to see the Republican Party eventually getting itself around to that than it is to see the pro-life party abandoning their stance against abortion. I think that it would be very hard to envision the Republican Party as it's currently constituted in the interest of soliciting more votes from women, or from women who are concerned about, quote, health issues, close quote, access to abortion, seeing that party move away from that, because that at some level is a defining, it would be like asking the Democrats to abandon their support of civil rights at a certain point.
Right, but I think what you can ask for is fewer candidates who make comments about the status of legitimate rape. And I think what you can say is perhaps a little flexibility on the issue of abortions being okay in the cases of rape or incest. And I think I was listening to an interview just the other day in the car from do you know who Richard Toucey is?
No, I do not.
He was running for the House in Massachusetts. And he's a Republican.
Yeah.
He's gay.
Yeah.
So he's pro-gay marriage. He's more flexible on the abortion issue. I don't know if you would call him pro-choice. I'm not exactly sure what his position was on that. And he was having a discussion with, and I guess this is a discussion that's happening at large in the Republican Party with a member of the, I can't remember exactly where he's from, but he was like a member of the Tea Party representative in Massachusetts. And they were basically arguing about what we were talking about earlier, the future of the Republican Party. And Richard Toucey was saying, we need to become more of a big tent again, because that used to be their thing. Having everybody under the sun used to be a Republican thing. And we need to get back to what everybody among us agrees in, which is fiscal responsibility and the government staying out of everything, out of our bedroom, out of a woman's uterus. I mean, that's what he said, and out of our wallet. And the other guy was saying, well, we've tried that. We ran moderates and they didn't win. Mitt Romney was a moderate and he didn't win. And that's what he was saying. And so we need to go back to our values, protecting the lives of unborn children, the sanctity of marriage. So he was like, we need to double down on these values and not vacillate on them.
Well,
and so, that seems to be the discussion that's going on.
That's going to be the debate. Now, I don't have any defense of the legitimate rape comment, but I do have a thought about that whole controversy, which is these guys, this is the Senate candidate in Arkansas who lost to Claire McCaskill after making some inappropriate remarks, and the Senate candidate in Indiana who lost Richard Lugar's seat after having made some appropriate remarks. And the observation is that, there is a pro-life argument in the case of rape and incest that says the baby is a human life who had nothing to do with how it was conceived and whose right to life is not in any way undermined by the fact that the method of conception may have been horrid, noxious, completely unacceptable, disgusting, or violative of the mother. That's one observation that might be allowed to enter into a discussion of the abortion question alone. Let me just finish this with the observation that if a woman is raped, or if she's impregnated as a consequence of incest, or both, then forcing her to carry a baby to term is an even more egregious imposition upon her autonomy than would be the case if she had become pregnant by some other means. Those are two different observations. One of them is about how imperative it is that the mother be allowed to make a choice on her own behalf if she's the victim of some impregnation that is violative of her. And the other is that the value of the life that she is carrying is not in any way diminished by the fact that it was conceived through some horrid mechanism. And neither of these Senate candidates was smart or articulate enough, or perhaps humane enough, to formulate the observation in that way. But before this is over, I just want to get on the table the observation that the baby didn't ask to be conceived, and that a concern for the baby's life is a legitimate moral stance, irrespective of how it came to be conceived, although a moral stance that might carry less weight in the overall decision about terminating the pregnancy if the pregnancy came about through a mechanism that was violative of the mother.
I guess you can talk about its legitimacy, but I'm more talking about, it's a losing issue.
It's a losing issue to observe that a baby...
in this electorate, there are plenty of people who are pro-life, but even a plurality of those people are willing to concede that perhaps abortion should be given in the case of rape or incest. And so, while, I can see how that argument might be made, I just don't think that it's a winning one anymore.
Now, here's what I'm saying, just to be clear. Abortion should be permitted, in my view, to a woman who's a victim of rape or incest. But it is also appropriate and in no way reflective of some kind of bad values that makes a person unfit for public office to observe that the life at issue in the decision of abortion is no less valuable for having been conceived in that way. It's just that we're weighing the value of the life and the autonomy of the mother, and the weighting might be different in that calculation if the woman has been impregnated through this violative means.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
Here's what I'd say to this.
And let me just finish here. Our politics ought to be, it may be losing just to say that, but that's to the discredit of our politics if that's the case.
Or discredit to our electorate.
Yes, okay, to the sophistication and
that's the opinion of the people.
Subtlety of our electorate.
But Dad, if I could just respond,
yes,
because
sir.
you take these large chunks of things and then I respond and you start talking again, and then when I try to talk, you get angry at me for interrupting you. So if I could just respond, that. What was I going to say? You were just talking for so long, I completely and totally lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. Take your time. I'm willing to not talk for a moment.
Oh, no, I lost it. Oh, well.
All right.
I don't know. I don't know what I had like a whole thing there. I had a thing.
Let's talk.
And I lost it.
So, okay, I'm sorry. It'll come back to you if it was an important thing.
It was about abortion. I don't remember.
Okay, and about the autonomy of the mom versus the value of the life of the fetus, and about how some candidates were just tongue-tied or idiots.
Yeah, okay, I remember it. Yeah, okay. These people need to be consistent. All right, I think that's a great position that they want to hold if they want to protect the life of the fetus.
Yeah.
And they want abortion. I think everybody wants the same thing. They want there to be no need for there to be abortions.
Well, that's true.
But the way that you get there isn't by outlawing abortion or preventing people easy access to contraceptives or promoting abstinence-only education, because it's never just a pro-life position. These people aren't just supporting that. They're also supporting a whole host of other things that are really contrary to the goal that they want to achieve.
Yeah, they believe...
If you want people to not have abortions, educate them. You know, if you want people to not have unwanted pregnancies, if you don't want children born into bad situations, educate your goddamn electorate. Let them get condoms.
bloggingheads.tv.
Yeah, I know. And then what I was going to say before that is I know that this is not something that you disagree with, Dad. I know this is something that you agree with. I'm not talking to you now.
No.
I guess I am talking to you, but I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the Aikens and Murdochs of the world.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not defending myself. I was just going to ask you to tone down the goddamn stuff a little bit, because we bloggingheads.tv listeners have delicate sensibilities.
Gosh darn.
There you go. That's much better. Thank you.
Gosh darn.
Okay, let's talk about religion very briefly. We are kind of at the end of our hour. We can pick this up in round 3 of the Glenn on Glenn debate. But I just want to go back to this theme that we touched on a little bit briefly, and just to set it up, I go to church, you don't. Okay? You have observed that you don't go because the attitude of the church that I attend toward the moral status of homosexuality is not one to your liking, and you being a gay man. Sorry?
I observed that I don't go because I'm an atheist.
Okay, you don't go because you're an atheist, and you wonder why I go. Okay?
Well, I know why you go.
All right. Why do I go?
You go because you find it comforting. And even though you don't really believe the superstitions, I'm using your word, not mine, of the people that you go to the church with, you find the music appealing. And I can understand the appeal of music, and I'm not just using this to refer to hymns and notes now, but also rhythm and community and all that jazz. And I can understand why you go. I just kind of wish it was a more tolerant church. And I know that there are gay people who go to this church. This is a discussion that we had last time.
Yeah.
And Pastor Ray Hammond is a man that I admire very, very much. And I owe a great debt of thanks to him for just the stirring things that he said at Mom's funeral. But that aside, it is a church that is very traditional and fundamental in its approach to the tenets of Christianity. It is one, and Pastor Ray Hammond has gone on record, that does not support gay marriage. And so, I mean, if all things were given, if I were to ever go to a church, and I wouldn't, again, because of my aforementioned religious beliefs, I mean, I guess unless it were maybe a United Universalist church or something like that, I would go to one that was a little more tolerant of me. I would go to one that I could get married in if I were to go to a church. That's what I would do.
Okay. Now, I want to come back to why I go. I get why you don't go. And I want to amplify what it is that I had to say previously about that, because I've had some regret that I was so tentative on the belief question.
You go, girl.
I go, and you observe that I don't believe, and I want to say, well, I'm not sure that I don't believe, okay? So, the genesis of my, the arc of my sort of belief trajectory is that in the beginning, I didn't believe. I mean, I had a connection to church because I was taken as a kid. but I didn't really believe. Came to a crisis in my life in my late 30s, early 40s, and I found myself in the church, and I found myself drawn to Christianity with conviction, and I became a believer. Came some years later, I found myself drifting away because I lost somehow the credibility that I had found so natural when I first came into the church in my late 30s and early 40s, so that by the time I get to my early 50s, I'm no longer attending religious services, and neither do I consider myself really a believer. Come now, I'm in my early 60s, early to mid 60s, I have to report. And I find myself back in the church, at first for the comforts of which you've just observed, for the camaraderie, for the relief that I find myself feeling as I worship in the presence of other people, for the music, understood both literally and figuratively, that one finds in that cultural space. I'm not doing anything better on Sunday mornings with my time. It's a wonderful experience. I always leave energized and refreshed and so on. So there is that kind of behavioral, sort of utilitarian element. But I also want to say that as I witness the ecstatic expressions of people engaged in worship, and as I continue to participate in this community's rituals, as I hear the Word of God, the Scriptures exposited through sermon and testimony and teaching, and as I study some Scripture myself, although not as diligently perhaps as one would expect of a good Christian, I find myself revisiting all of these questions and, without resolving them, at least wanting to bracket them. So what I would say about myself now is not that I don't believe. I mean, what I would say is that I am beset by doubt, but that I have doubts about that doubt. I'm somewhere in between where I had been in my early 50s when I drifted away from the church, and where I had been in my late 30s where I went in the first place. And I'm reconsidering all of these things. And I'm doing that on the basis of, 20 years more life experience, 25 years more life experience, and on a sense that, I don't know all of the answers, and I'm prepared to suspend my disbelief a little bit more these days than before. And I just wanted to get that comment on the record. I didn't want to cede so much ground to you as to make it simply uncontested claim that I'm going to the church just so that I can be entertained, and that I go without any deeper conviction. I go with an uncertain conviction that does run deep and that has yet to be fully resolved, and that I want to make myself available and present there to see just what the Lord might do in my life, is the way that they would put it, and that's the way I'm going to put it here. I guess you have no reaction to that.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've had this discussion before. I don't know. I think that's fine. I mean, I guess I'm either not at that point in my life, or the calculus is a lot simpler for me.
Okay. I'm sorry, go on. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay. The calculus is for me that I believe that we're all agnostics. I believe that true knowledge is impossible. And so I don't scoff at this idea of having doubt of your doubt, or, doubt in either way. It's just that for me, given that, at least in my personal experience, I have not seen evidence either way for the existence of God, or in that case, the evidence might be heavily against the idea that the God as is professed literally in the Christian Bible exists. I would say that's a little unlikely. I would say it's unlikely that there was a resurrection. I would say that I don't believe in miracles, but I would say, if you were to talk about a deist clockmaker, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any, I would have no way of knowing. But I would say that in the lack of any evidence, in the face of that, my default position is one of disbelief. Why just assume that there's something there that there's no evidence for? And I mean, I don't have any problem with someone doing their own personal math and coming up with a different answer, but that's the one that I come to. And so, hence, considering that I don't believe in a God, and considering that I don't really belong to this community that appeals to you so, and considering that I have my own sources of music. I know before we started recording this, you were going to say you were going to ask me to come to church, so I guess I'm preempting that question by answering it. Since I have my own source of music, I'm disinclined to go.
There's a guy named Stephen Brahms, B-R-A-M-S. He teaches at New York University. He's a social scientist. He has a book out there called Superior Beings. Do they exist? And if they did, how would we know? Okay, and in this book, he's a logical game theory type guy. And he says, this is just about the purely rational, is belief rational? And he says, there could be a God, there could not be. There's little evidence for that. Okay, no evidence. All right, let's say there's no evidence. On the other hand, maybe the reason that there's no evidence is that God wants us to believe in him without evidence. And God could reveal himself. He could exist and choose not to reveal himself even though he existed, because he wanted us to elect to believe in him in the absence of direct evidence that would have been pleasing to God. So he speculates. And then he goes on to ask the question, therefore, if I'm a person who is contemplating whether it's rational to believe in God or not, and I have no evidence, I may nevertheless be able to get to the position of thinking it rational to believe in God by concluding that were he to exist, it's likely that he would not want to reveal himself because he would much prefer that we believe in him in the absence of evidence than so. And so notwithstanding the fact that there is no evidence, I'm nevertheless going to believe. Now,
right,
that's not
why
a proof.
I said that people can come to a different answer than I do.
That's not a proof. It's just the suggestion that there's nothing inconsistent between belief and rationality. And I think I find that to be an interesting line of thought. Yes, Glenn, and as we conclude here, I want to ask you to come to Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church on Wachusett Street in Jamaica Plain, Boston. I want to ask you to come over to the service. I want to ask you to just come and sit. Just come and experience it. Not one time. Come a few times. Come and talk to people. Come and see what goes on there. Come and have a concrete understanding of what they're doing, and not an abstract and stereotypic characterization of what this congregation is.
You're talking like I've never been to church.
No, I want you to come again.
I went to church for years.
Yeah, I want you to come again.
And I
want you to come now.
You're saying like I don't, like I have this stereotypic view. Are you saying like I don't know what church is? Dad, I've been to church. I've participated in services. I went to Sunday school. I'm not coming from a position of ignorance or stereotyping. Far from it. In fact, I believe in this very Blogging Heads, I've acknowledged that there are very different kinds of churches that subscribe to whole different hosts of things, and that if I were to go to a church, I would go to one of those.
Okay.
I just don't really want to go to yours. So what used to be mine to Mom's, I don't.
I'm accepting that without any equivocation. I'm merely appealing to you to, in your more mature status now, you're in your mid-20s, you have got some years of experience under your belt. I just think you might discover some stuff there that you don't know about the church and about religion. And I'm just suggesting that you give it a shot. Think of it as an anthropological expedition. Think of it as simply...
It's not going to work.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm going to continue to go, and I may knock on your door on a Sunday morning as I'm on my way out to see if you've changed your mind. I tell you what, there's not a better show on a Sunday morning. It's just an amazing experience to see those people worship together. The praise and worship, singing and musicianship, the preaching, the changed lives, the testimony, the enthusiasm, the community. It's really inspiring. And in this particular church, which started 25 years ago, as you know, because we were there at the very beginning, your mother and I, and then you were born into this church,
first baby born into it.
Has blossomed, first baby born in, has blossomed into a marvelous communal organization and religious community that has had a huge impact on the quality of life in Boston, and has affected thousands and has its influence reaching all throughout the world based on the activities that members of the church are engaged in and which they support through their generosity. And it's an inspiring thing to behold. I tell you, my son, you oughtn't to deny yourself.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Dad, just from what you're saying, I don't really think you understand my position. And I know that even if I went once, that you would not be satisfied and that you would keep on going. So I'm just telling you now that it's not looking like I'm going to go. I mean, maybe if I want to talk to Pastor Ray Hammond about something, I might go. But I don't want to go. And moreover, I mean, I don't know. I don't want you to stop asking, but I know that's not going to happen. So,
well, I'll ask in good humor.
I feel like we're petering out here.
I'll ask in good humor from time to time, and I will keep praying for you, my son.
That's very nice.
Very Christian of you. All right, Glenn. We have another Glenn show, a Glenn on Glenn encounter in the can now, man. I'm very proud that we've been able to do this, and I look forward to the next time.
Ding, ding, ding.
All right. Take care, and thanks again.
See ya.
Bye.